Welcome to the Cyber Business Podcast, where we feature top founders and entrepreneurs and share their inspiring stories. Now, let's get started with the show.
Matthew Connor here, host of the Cyber Business Podcast, where we feature successful business leaders, top law firms, and green energy companies. Today, we're fortunate enough to be joined by Eric Pinto, Senior Director at SOCSoter. Eric, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's good to see you.
Good to see you too. All right, before we get started, quick word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by cyberlinks.com. That's cyberlynx.com. Cyberlinks is a complete technology solution provider that ensures your business has the most reliable and professional IT service and the only company that guarantees your safety and satisfaction. At Cyberlinks, we specialize in helping small businesses, usually 10 to 150 employees, with their IT and cybersecurity. And we have clients come to us all the time that need help with IT and cybersecurity compliance. And this is where SOCSoter really shines, which is why I'm glad, Eric, you're here with us today. So, Eric, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's good to be here.
All right. So, for those that aren't familiar with SOCSoter, can you give us a little rundown of what SOCSoter is, what you guys do, how you help? Tell us about SOCSoter.
Yeah, absolutely. So SOC stands for SOC, is Security Operations Center, and solder is a derivative of Greek for protector. So we protect security operations and we protect business networks. That's where the name comes from. As an organization, we've been laser focused in the small business space, providing a range of services from network to endpoint to cloud, monitoring and security assessment tools as well.
I like it. So, for those that aren't really familiar with SOC, can you explain to them, how's that different from their, MSP or their IT consultant or, their IT
Sure.
people?
Yeah, absolutely. And we really work in tandem or in partnership with the service provider community. So the bulk of the managed service providers that you'll find are really IT generalists, right? You go to your service provider, you need help with deploying a new solution, you need to install software, you need a new desktop, you need server support, just a wide range of services. And what they'll typically have is some capability to monitor from a network perspective to make sure that all those systems are up and running. Where we partner in is we pair in then a different set of lenses, a different view of the network, where we're looking at things from a threat perspective. What threats might impact an organization on any given day? What threats are currently impacting an organization? So let's say, from the end user perspective, the user perspective, my computer's acting weird. Well, what does that mean, right? So we'll zoom in on that device, make some initial determinations, and we may find that there's malware or ransomware that's getting launched into that device. As a SOC, our goal would be then to see it in motion, so we see it as it's impacting the single device, and then the goal would be to hopefully see it before it were to spread across all of your devices. So having a team that's laser focused and looking at the log data, the analytics, and the systems in place to ensure that you're not being impacted maliciously.
Love it. So in full disclosure, we are also a SOCSoter partner. And what I love about that is that we come to you guys with, that you provide that security piece that we just don't specialize in. We're great at that customer service. We're great at taking care of all their little problems whenever they happen, keep them up and running. But that extra piece, and we've got some other, cybersecurity, products that we provide our clients to keep them safe. But what I love about SOCSoter is that security ops center, that 24/7 monitoring, having that endpoint detection and response, and the app that runs on the computer to, check things as they're going along, as well as the Microsoft 365 monitoring. So anytime there's some weird activity there, we get an alert from you guys saying, hey, there's a problem here right away. Great. We can, go to the client, get it all squared away before it's even an issue. So I think that's a great feature that I'm surprised more MSPs aren't doing, because it's just such an important part. I think, moving forward in the world that we live in now, yeah, cybersecurity is where it's at. And it's, like you said, we tend to be more, IT generalists that are great with customers. But it's that you got to have that cybersecurity piece in there, which I think you guys do a great job of. There are other providers, but you guys are just fantastic. Always on the spot. It's great.
We'd love
Um,
to hear it. We'd love to hear it.
well, let me ask you, what are some of those things that, where, because we've seen it a bunch with ours, but I'm kind of curious from your perspective, some of the things that MSPs often overlook or fail to mention.
Yeah,
What are you guys seeing?
yeah. That's a great question. I mean, and I think you sort of started to go in on it when you're talking about just things that you guys yourselves aren't providing, right? When you think about your busy day and the client to client relationships and everything else that you're responsible for, taking that next step and understanding what the risk profile even of a client might look like is something that I wouldn't say that service providers aren't doing it, but they're I think that it's just becoming sort of in trend to take the next step beyond just your desktop antivirus and your firewall to look at the compliance, look at regulations, look at the type of data that a client might have, and then associate risk with that, right? So if you're supporting a CPA, or if you're supporting a law firm, you can think just inherently, what type of data does a law firm have about their clients and about the cases that they're responsible for, right? A responsibility goes beyond just locking the file folder at the end of the day and locking your office. Because if that data were to be impacted digitally or through the cloud, there's the responsibility still there, right? So
Yeah,
at a minimum, in most states that here in the U.S., if that data is exposed, you have to go out to the impacted parties and let them know that their data was potentially violated. That's
absolutely.
a conversation that whether you're a law firm or insurance broker or a CPA, that you typically don't want to have, right? So when you talk about then zooming back out to the MSP, I would think today needs to be mindful of these things, right? And we spend a lot of our time. This is outside of the scope of the services that we provide. We spend a lot of time just on education, just on, hey, these are the things that we as an organization that's focused in this area are seeing every day. Are you also seeing that in your client base? Right. And then furthermore, these are the questions that we're asking of these type of entities, these end customer entities. Are you asking these questions? And that's where I'm seeing the deficiency. They're not even asking the question. They're not even going beyond their standard scope of services, RMM, desktop security, and firewall to say, okay, you are in this space. There are these challenges that we see sort of globally in this space. How are you addressing them? Those are questions that we're not seeing asked from the partner to the end customer, and quite frankly, it's dangerous.
Oh, for sure. I think beyond the danger aspect, which of course is important. I think from an MSP owner perspective, one of the things that I've seen is that we recently just had a client come to us with the same thing. They had multiple service providers. They had an MSP doing one thing, they had in-house IT doing another, they had another MSP doing something else, and then they referred to us for another issue. And I'm like, really? And it gave us the opportunity to replace everybody at the table, because
Sure.
none of them were saying, hey, and they all offered all the services, every single one of them, except for the in-house IT, who was, subsequently let go. Not
Right.
because we came in and did it. They were looking to let them go. So, we're happy to support, any internal IT, but they were looking for a way to replace their internal IT. And while they had these two other MSPs, clearly able to do this, because they weren't communicating, they were left in their little silo of, I provide this hosting, I provide this software. I'm like, seriously? You could have been providing, now we provide the hosting, we provide the software, we provide the IT. So for a lot of MSPs, just looking at it as, from that perspective, I don't want somebody else coming in and taking my customers because they went looking for, hey, we need compliance for, let's say they're a private equity firm or, financial service company. And they're like, hey,
Right.
we need compliance here. And well, our IT guys, I love them. They're great. But I've never heard them talk about, they don't even think about you if you're not coming to them first. They don't even
That's
think
right.
about you. And it's
Yeah.
almost insulting because you're like, we've been together for years. How did you not know? When did you
Right.
tell them? Right? It's
Right.
ridiculous.
That's exactly right. And that's the danger that I was speaking of. It's not really danger in the sense of like, they're gonna, be forced to close their doors, although that could happen from a liability perspective. But it's just the danger of really losing that trust, right? If you look at
Yeah.
most service providers have a trust relationship with the end client, right? They are the trusted advisor. You're my guy. I go to you, same as that when I go to my doctor or when I go to my mechanic, right? If I feel something funny and my shoulder cricks now, I'm gonna go to the doctor and say, hey, what's that about? If the doctor then doesn't know about rotator cuff or whatever this might be, that I'm going to look for a new doctor, right? And in
That's
the
right.
same in the same vein, we're seeing more demand from the end customer side, more even education now at the end customer side, likely due to different trade associations where it's peer-to-peer engagement. And if they go to a trade event, if they start looking at some of the responsibilities coming up in their industry, and then they go turn back around to their service provider and say, hey, well, what do you know about this guidance or this regulation? And the partner is scratching their head and going, or or even worse yet, knows all about it, has never, ever, ever mentioned it, and then goes, oh yeah, you could do X, Y, and Z. Well, that trust value is lost.
Yeah.
You were my guy. You never told me. Again, back to like an auto, my auto mechanic example. I went in and I talked to you and I said, hey, do my tires look bad? And you go, oh yeah, these are bald. You need new ones. Well, you didn't look. I
Yeah,
brought it in for an
exactly.
inspection. You offered me a 120-point inspection, and you never looked to see that my brakes needed servicing or that I needed new tires. You're not my guy
Yeah.
or
That's really
gal.
interesting. I don't remember who brought it up. It might have been, I can't remember who this was, but I recently heard this really great bit about information disparity, and meaning that it used to be, let's just rewind 30, 40 years ago, right? Before the internet, you would go to anywhere, and the salesperson would be basically the subject matter expert on that product or
That's
that
right.
service, and you would have
That's right.
very little knowledge of it, or you might have some, but certainly not as much as them. And now with the internet, it is often, they know as much and sometimes
Mm-hmm.
more about the products and services that they're looking for than the salesperson. And so, to your point, is that trust is lost when they're like, "You're my guy for my rotator cuff for my car," and you didn't bring it up. And I think it gets really interesting, because now we're in this age where, as a small IT company, not only do you have to be providing those services, but you got to be dropping out so much information about what you do and these products, the services, the world, and everything, so that people see you as their subject matter expert. Because if you don't know more than them, they will find somebody who does, right? And
That's
then
right.
I think there's an interesting thing where a lot of these IT companies, they're told, in kind of best practices training, at these seminars and stuff, that hey, they should be going out and doing these, business reviews, these quarterly business reviews and stuff, where every quarter they're meeting with their customers. Now, I don't know if you've ever tried this or heard of what the experience is, but you try getting, it's sitting down for an hour every quarter with your client, your business owner, and see just how many of those they want to sit down and talk about. Right. Because the reality is a quarter comes up pretty fast, these days. Time kind of flies. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
we just met. We just
Right.
met. Right? Did something
Well,
change? And so,
well, yeah. Did something change? And I think the problem is that you're setting these up, and again, I always say, getting to the why, right? So you're setting these up, you're following, whichever vendor taught you how to do this thing, and you said, yeah, that's a good idea, and it's not a bad idea. But now you're sitting down with them, yeah, but you have no reason why to sit down with them. So now you're sitting down, hey, we're sitting down again, and the business owner goes, okay, yeah, it's March, yep, we're having our meeting. What are we talking about? What are we
yeah,
doing, Matt?
exactly.
Why am I here? Right?
Yep.
And
Just
and
wanted to
that's where
upsell you.
right, and it normally is some some vendor program that sets up these meetings that then talks about some service, and the service again might be valid, it might be valuable, but if you're not aligning it with the concerns of the business that you're serving, they're not going to get it. It's not going to resonate for them. And that's where I say, I think the biggest challenge on the MSP side is they're not really asking the right questions, and they're not. And it's you kind of get into this issue where again, as generalists, you can't know everything, right? Like I deal in compliance and security all day. I only know the surface level of tons of different regulations that are coming up. But quite frankly, there's a baseline litmus test that we apply, that I would hope that service providers start to apply, which is just taking a look at your client, figuring out what your client does, right? So again, we could just talk super loosely about these, and then we'll apply the test, and I think you'll find that it fits. Law firms, CPAs, certainly healthcare, financial services, every one of them, and here's the test, are they managing or maintaining or processing some level of sensitive material, right? And that could be PII, personal identifiable information. That could be the PCI credit card information. That could be PHI healthcare details. It could be CUI government related information. All of it requires some level of monitoring, some level of awareness, some level of scrutiny, some level of incident response capacity should that data be impacted. So an MSP could know nothing about various compliance challenges that are coming up and just apply that test. I've got a law firm. They've got data for their clients. That data needs to be secured while they have it, while they're transacting it, while they're emailing it, while they're faxing it. It's got to be secured. Full stop. Right? Same thing with CPA. Same thing with financial with a hedge fund. All the same rule applies. Now the compliance requirements might be slightly different, but they're going to come down to monitor it, be aware of who's accessing it, and secure it in motion.
Okay.
Simple stuff.
So let's dig into that a little bit, right? So we'll put the compliance piece aside for a second, because I want to talk about that. What that means to so many MSPs, what that means to the small business owner, how that plays a role. But before we do that, so when you say, okay, these things need to be monitored, let's dig into the beans and bullets of that. What exactly does that mean? What should what should that small business owner be looking to put in place to secure their let's just say sensitive information, be that whatever it may be?
A good question. I'll actually give you an answer that's not even self-serving to what we do. At a minimum, I think that if you look at most businesses today, they've got firewall and they've got an endpoint or an AV, antivirus, right? Mm-hmm. That's sort of the security that you'll find in just about every business that's out there. Some firewall, whether it's a cheap off the shelf firewall or it's expensive, it doesn't really matter. They've got some level of firewall that's protecting the perimeter, and then they've got some software that's on each, at least Windows-based device, that's going to look for viruses and malware. That's baseline security. When you talk about monitoring it, you're going to at least want to monitor those pieces, right? So you want to see when there's something that comes through the firewall that's in question, that you've got some level, some capacity to look at it in near real time. So within a few hours, look at the concern, make a general assessment, and then apply the appropriate fix, right, at the firewall. Same thing on the endpoint with an antivirus or anti-malware. What we're seeing is the next generation of that, and I guess it's not really next generation anymore because it's becoming pretty standard, would be like an EDR, which is an endpoint level detection and response. And there's a lot of confusion today on, well, what does that mean? And the confusion, if for all my service providers out there, it's not your fault. The confusion is the fault of the marketing teams. Because you've got EDR, NDR, XDR, MDR, MTR, all these different terms that largely come back to the same thing. You've got some level of an agent or software that's on a device that's looking for malicious activity and anomalous behavioral changes on the device itself. So you're looking for, what are the indicators that malware might give as it's trying to impact and gain access to a machine, or once it's gained access to a machine, what are the things that it'll try to do? Changes to file registry, changes to system restore, like all the things that you would see pre-ransom, right? Mm-hmm. So when we talk about monitoring, at a minimum, you need to have a competent, for the environments that have sensitive data, you need to have a competent EDR or endpoint level detection and response capacity deployed, right? And that's an area where I've seen advancement. So we're talking about positives. That's an area where I see a lot of advancement in the MSP space. That's sort of where they're leaving it now. I think they're gaining it's gaining traction. They're getting understanding, and quite frankly, it's not expensive typically to deploy that type of a solution. So it's a couple bucks more per endpoint, so not a lot. So you're seeing a lot of activity there, and that's phase one of monitoring. For us, what we do is we take the baton from just those endpoints and we take it out across the entire network. So instead of just looking at, if you look at your customer base, you're going to have, call it 60 or 70% of the devices are going to be known assets, right? So desktops and servers that are under your management. You've got your EDR on them, hopefully. You've got your RMM pointed at it and looking at the networking coming out of those devices, and you get a pretty good visibility of those devices. But if we can agree that that's only 60 or 70% of what a network might have on it, you've only got 60 or 70% visibility. So we take it a step further and we look at it from a network-wide perspective. So we're saying everything that's on that network, so not only your desktops and servers, but your multifunction printer fax systems, which all have memory storage, that all are seeing tons of documents as they're being copied and things like that. And so those systems have been impacted. And anything else that's connected, your thermostat might be connected. Your phone system is certainly leveraged and connected. You've got things in your conference room. We've seen breaches on our end as a SOC. We've seen breaches that have occurred and been launched through an IP camera. For example, an IP camera, you would think, well, they can only see what the camera can see. Not true. They actually gained access to the device, and they use the device as a server to then gain digital access into everything else. Right. So it was just another conduit to information on the network. The net of that is, when we talk about monitoring, we really talk about everything that you've got plugged in, everything that's deployed or given an IP address needs to be monitored. And to tie back into compliance and regulations, we're seeing an increased demand for in language that includes any and all assets. So not just desktops and servers, but they're closing loopholes for third-party devices, shadow IT, employee-owned devices. All of them, if they're on the corporate network, need to be monitored.
So that brings up a really interesting point, because now everybody, there's so much work from home, and so many companies have basically downsized their corporate, office, and have even become fully remote, or it's part time, but largely at some point it's 100% remote, but several days of the week it's in person. So what's your solution there? What do you recommend?
Yeah. So I mean, in the last 3 years, we've seen such a dynamic shift in what the office. I didn't put my quotes up. What the office looks like, right? In the last 3 years, we've seen organizations that never would allow their workforce to work from home. They've had to build and deploy technology to get there, and quite frankly, they discovered that it wasn't so bad, right? So now you see a lot of either all remote and even more mixed hybrid environments. My buddy works for a large insurance group here in the Dallas area. They've probably got 400 or 500 employees, but they cycle. So only 100 of them are in office on any given day, right? Yeah. And they went down. They went from having everyone having a dedicated desk. Now that you go to a rotating desk, once a week, right? You're in there once a week. You go in for your team meetings, you have your meetings, and then you go and work from home. So in those environments, it becomes a challenge because you need to still monitor that network environment if they have it, right? So you still need to cover the multifunction printer fax. You still need to cover, the ancillary other things that are on the network. But then you also need that scrutiny on the endpoint, and that's why that endpoint strategy is still important. It's just a piece of it. So for all of my MSPs out there that are focused, and leveraging heavily on the endpoint, still need to do that. We're just suggesting that there's other things. If they're all remote, there is no physical environment, then everyone, if they went remote, they went to the cloud, right? What's unfortunate is that when all this cloud movement started, we were hearing, and we still hear quite a bit, well, my client's all in the cloud, so I don't really need to worry about this.
Good point.
it's a point.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if it's the right point, but I get why it's being made, right? Because Microsoft or Cisco or whomever the provider of that service is will have their own, security levers that need to be pulled. Quite frankly, we're seeing more and more that they're not, though. That multi-factor was turned off or disabled for a group of users or for all the users, or other controls were taken out because they were deemed as cumbersome to the end client, so they turned them off. So it's not that these cloud solutions don't have the capacity to monitor for sensitive data. It's, are they set up to do so? Are you aware of even what the sensitive data is? Because if you're not, Microsoft isn't necessarily going to know, right? So
No.
if you've got a file server that's got all these records in it, does Microsoft know that that server is uniquely different from the next 5 servers that you have, right? So, in some ways, you have to go in and be able to identify at the file level, let's say, that this is key or critical, to your environment, and you want to scrutinize it a bit different. You need to look at the logs from those systems and make sure that they're not being impacted. So there's a lot of stuff that still can be done. We fortunately will tie into the majority of the cloud services that are deployed out in small business. So we've got API interconnects into 365, which is becoming standard now. A lot of groups do that. But we go further, the 365, the entire Microsoft stack, including Azure, including SharePoint and Teams, including Windows Defender, and then we zoom out into other services like AWS, Google Workspace, and then all the way out to security solutions by Cisco, by Fortinet, by Sophos, SentinelOne, CrowdStrike, Carbon Black, Cylance, right? So we're taking this data, and this is maybe what's unique about our approach, but we see ourselves first and foremost as a SOC. So as a security operations team, I need to get and ingest as much data and information as possible so that I can, effectively serve my end client. So if I can get data from their cloud services, correlate that data with what I'm getting off the network or off the endpoint independently, then I'm just providing a better service to the client.
Well, it's funny because, going back just a little bit, you had mentioned, things like turning off MFA, and Microsoft, of course, isn't going to alert you unless you specifically set up for that.
That's right.
So it's funny because we got a client who came to us just a few months ago. And they were like, it was funny because we'd done just a little bit of work for them, tried to get them as a subscribing client, with our security pack and everything. And they were like, it's not ready for it. We're not there yet. We're too small. Now, mind you, they were not too small. It's like a 12-person shop. They're making, it was tons of money, right? They manage money, they invest money.
Mm-hmm.
It was plenty of money. This was nothing. It hadn't risen to the top of the to-do list. And they're like, but we'll get to it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I had tried several times to convince them, look, you really need to, your industry is, as a private equity firm, it's your key target, and FINRA's coming out and saying, hey, look, they're compliant. We're gonna put in rules because you're when you make a deal, you announce that deal, and suddenly this little company now becomes this target because, oh, hey, look, this little company now has a checkbook. So if the funny part is that they get attacked like crazy once that's done. So they're part of the due diligence for the packet is that the cybersecurity is supposed to be done. Okay, great. That's a whole nother thing. We'll tie into that in the compliance talk here in a little bit. But the interesting part was that when it comes to that MFA, these guys, they'd started with GoDaddy, using their Microsoft 365 back when they first started a couple years prior, and it was just a few, and they've grown to 10, and they kind of outgrew it. But the funny part was, I don't know if you're aware, but it was like the end of August, beginning of September, Microsoft said, hey, look, MFA is going to be enforced by default on all the 365 accounts. And GoDaddy's like, okay, so we're going to force it as well, right? Well, turns out when they called us in, they're like, look, our email keeps getting compromised, and people keep getting these, $200,000 wires sent elsewhere, not to us. And they're like, this is a real problem. This is the third time this has happened in 2 weeks. I'm like, and you're just now telling me? They're like, well, we called GoDaddy and they said, just change your password. You're fine. I'm like, And and surprisingly, that wasn't the case, was it? They're like, no.
Right,
And
no.
so they're like, so what can you do? I was like, all right, we got in there, cleaned them all up. And obviously, the funny part was that MFA was turned off for everybody, but GoDaddy had forced it on automatically on all those accounts at the beginning of whatever it was, like October or September, whatever. And the person had gone in, turned it off. They cleared out all of the logs. Every time they went in and accessed an account, they wiped the access logs, in GoDaddy. So we couldn't even, kid you not. I was like, oh, no kidding.
The logs are the most important thing. That's the black box.
That's right. And they go in and wipe it. And they were clear, they were cleaning their tracks. So this was no dummy. Why they were, trying to do this, wire fraud is beyond me, because ultimately they should get caught, because that's a pretty easy one. Right. Somebody's got to own that bank account you sent it to. But in any event, so we ended up using.
But if the bank account's a foreign bank account, then you can't.
It wasn't. That's what's mind-boggling. They're U.S. accounts. It's like,
that's weird.
You're going to prison,
Right.
And the funny part was, it's almost like nobody cared. I'm like, first of all, you got to contact the FBI. You got to contact the bank. They can run this down, and this person should be. They get so much financial crime, it doesn't even rise to the top. And it's funny because then you see these things like, I don't know if you saw that Madoff on, like, I think it was Netflix, right?
Yeah.
And the craziness of it all, and with these financial crimes, is that even when you're a Bernie Madoff, they're so inundated with the sheer magnitude of financial crimes that now they're like, it's not, don't worry about it. Just, don't do that again. Like, to the victim, like, do better to not get victimized. But in any event, we ended up, simply we ended up migrating them to a 365 account. We obviously turned on, multi-factor authentication, all their stuff, got all their endpoints cleaned up, brought in SOCSoter. And the great part was, anytime there's any change to that account now, we see it, we know, great. And so everything's, locked down, and it worked out really nicely. But it's funny that these things people think are, well, nobody's doing that. The fuck they're not. That stuff happens. And it's crazy because it really does. And then you got to balance this, like, kind of fear mongering. When it comes to security, it's like, oh, that's, you're just a fear monger. Like, I've been doing business like this for 20 years and I've had no problems. True. But, that's kind of like, you could have no immune system whatsoever, have a compromised immune system, go outside, walk around, have no problem. You just walk the street, you walk down the street, you walked into the park, you played all day, you came home, no problem. Yet you walk into the next room, somebody is sick, you get those, and suddenly you're sick. So it's just a matter of time if you don't, have that protection. And I think, so it's trying to convince people of that. And
everyone thinks about, the idea of the hacker with the hoodie on in their basement, saying, I'm going to target XYZ Financial today, right? That's not the way it works, right? Like, the whole idea, especially with the phishing attempts, is, I can get the same effect from one victim. Let's say I go after a big company, and I target that big company, and they've got 1,000 employees, and I get all 1,000 records. Or I could target 10 or even 100 small companies with only 10, right? So I could target 100 small companies with only 10 computers. Which one's going to have better security? The large one with 1,000 employees, or each of those 100 small companies with only 10 that says I'm not a target, right?
Yeah.
To the bad guy, the threat actor, it makes no difference. I'm going to get 1,000 records today, right? Whether I get it from one or whether I get it from 100 parties, I'm going to get 1,000 today. I'm going to get 1,000 records tomorrow. I can monetize those 1,000 records for, $50 a piece on overseas, and I make my money. So I just made 50 grand either way.
Yep. And the thing I love about small business, I would not want to be the person in charge of, IT and security at one of these, large firms, right? Because it's crazy. Your attack surface is gigantic, especially now when you're talking like multinational. Oh my goodness, what a headache, right? Mm-hmm. But a little, 10-person, 20-person, 50-person, 100-person shop, and it's all local. You're all in the same area, or you're all in the US. Now this is a very small or very, a bunch of very tiny attack surfaces. Much easier to protect a small attack surface
if they'll do it. If they'll recognize the risk and recognize that even though they are a small fish with only 20 employees, that they still are managing, you know, the sensitive data of others. Back to my litmus test, right? So you've got a small financial firm, but they're managing millions of dollars for other people and other companies, right? So it doesn't really matter that they're micro. You know, the advantage to the bad actor is millions of dollars on the other side through the accounts that
Yeah.
they have access to.
Well, it's funny because it's also kind of like, I like to call it head trash, because while they thought they were too small, okay, they thought they were too small, but now we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars in management. Yes, in their world, right, of the finance world, they're a small fish. They're a tiny little guppy, sure, but it's still hundreds of millions of dollars to the rest of the world. So from their perspective, they're tiny. They're not a target. From, the rest of the world, that's a ton of money, and they're a huge target. But the beauty is they're so small. And to your point, they're not taking care of security. So they're an easy target with access to lots of capital. And they got hit hard.
And if I can get a wire transfer, 20 grand, 30 grand, 50 grand, that's still a win for the bad actor. Wow.
Yeah, twice.
$250,000. $250,000. Super easy hit. I mean, you got to look at this and go, what risk versus reward, right? So the reward is super huge. The risk is super low on the bad actor side. And again, this becomes a numbers game. So again, for the non-tech people that are out there, if I send out 10,000 phishing attacks through Facebook, through cat memes on Facebook, and just say, click on this cat meme and find out more. And now I can get 5 people to click or 10 people to click and open up my machine to compromise. I win. It doesn't matter. I didn't have to work for it, right? So if I can I'll send out 1 million the next time. And again, I don't care if the small guy clicks it or the large guy clicks it. I'm going to play the numbers game.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. I think maybe what would help small businesses more, and I think we'll start I'm going to see if I can start a series on this of small small companies that have been the victim of some sort of security breach of sorts, right? And not to just as a sort of a PSA. So then when there's other companies that are like that, they can be like, it's one thing for you and I, we can tell stories all day. They can be true or not. And I think that's when when you've operated for, decades or even years, and you've had no problems whatsoever. Like, is this story that they're telling me, could that apply to me? Maybe, but it hasn't. So what are the odds? Whereas if you get somebody who, looks like them, talks like them, lives like them, and it's like, it happened to me, and here's my story, then it's like, oh crap, okay, maybe they can relate better.
I think that the biggest problem though, and this is the service provider can help here if they can start to really just internalize and believe what's in front of them. The challenge is that the end customer has this idea that it's going to be incredibly expensive, right? Like this is going to be like the cost of me getting to where you're suggesting that I go, Matt, is going to be $5,000 a month, and for my 20-person organization, $5,000 a month is just more than I'm willing to spend, and I would agree. I'd go, wow. So yeah, the risk is I could get hit for a couple 100,000, but if I'm gonna have to spend 60,000 a year, I don't. Maybe I'll take the risk.
Right,
but
with a little bit of insurance, it's cheaper. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but they can't anymore, right? And that's the other loophole that's closing. But the reality is where this may have been $5,000 a month for that small business to achieve 5 years ago, you can get the same type of technologies now. Again, as low as some of these endpoint solutions. Again, not self-serving for me because I don't do it, but a couple of bucks a desktop. So if I can at least level up for a couple of bucks a desktop, so again, that's what, $40 in cost, right? Maybe $60 to the end client. It's worth it. And then you talk about what I do with the network monitoring, call it $100, $150 in cost. Again, 250 to the end client. We're talking about, a complete solution for a 20 or 30 person organization that to them probably isn't more than $500 a month.
Yeah.
So is it worth $500 a month? Yeah, sure, I'll spend that. You have to make it relatable and, allay any fears of, well, they can't afford it. The technology has advanced in a way that these solutions are available. and are relatively affordable for the end client, as long as the service provider is putting them together correctly.
Yeah, and I think that, sadly, and I realize that it's not 100% accurate, but I think that, cybersecurity ends up being in most small business owners' minds, uh, much like an insurance policy, right? While it's not going to pay out, it's the same kind of concept, and I think that that decision-making process and the cost benefit, analysis is pretty much the same that they go through when they're like, well, should we get this insurance policy? It's one thing when it's mandated by the government. Oh, you got to have it. Okay, great. No brainer. People love being forced to do something. Like, it's not a choice. You have to do it. Boom. Great. Great. One less decision for me to make as a business owner. Great. Cost of doing business. Got it. That should be with the approach with cybersecurity. Like, oh, cost of doing business. This is just what I have to do. And to your point, what I do like about SOCSoter is that price point is so good that when we go to our clients and say, look, this is what it takes. You need this. They don't blink, because it's like, well, we built that relationship of trust, and the price point is so reasonable. It's not something we're like, oh, geez, really? I mean, do we have to? Yeah, we've done it so long and not had a problem. Why do we have to now? Now they're like, oh, okay, we can do that. That's great. I thought you were going to hit us with a huge bill. That makes
That's
sense.
right.
Great. Let's do it. So
that's
no,
that's
I
that's
totally
right.
agree.
That's right. And while I think I think we've really hit the mark on the pricing, I think there are other solutions that are out there. It really comes down to, again, the service provider being able to message that, right, to relay that message so that it becomes a business concern. This isn't no longer really a financial conversation. We could talk about whether or not you can afford a plus or minus $500, but I mean, let's be realistic here. It's a business decision, and those are the people that you need to get it in the room. So unfortunately, the CFO is normally not our friend, right? But the reality is he can have a seat in the room, but we need three or four other folks, guys and gals in the room as well, that can weigh in from a business perspective, understand the business related challenge, the business impacting risk, and then make the decision of whether or not $500 is worthwhile. Because I think that 3 out of 4 of those people automatically are going to agree that for $500 you need to go ahead and spend it.
Yeah. Well, let's go through this then. So for let's help that small business owner or that MSP, with this decision, and let's do it. Let's first go with, the on the compliance side, right? So in terms of compliance, right now, I think this makes it the easiest pitch, and so let's go over what are some of those industries, what's some of the compliance, and and how to, what is it that they actually need, what should they be looking for, stuff like that. So first,
Yep.
when it comes to compliance, what kind of industries we talking here?
So yeah, I'll start off by saying I've been in this space for longer than I'd like to admit, but call it 15 years in security. And quite frankly, while there's been different changes and different drivers over the period of time, most of them have been not well enforced, right? So if you look at HIPAA came out in 1996, and obviously it affects the medical crowd. Most medical organizations would say, yeah, I'm not going to worry about it, right? I'll just go ahead and leverage insurance, and if there's a real issue, it's not that going to be that big of a deal. What's happened in the last couple of years is the regulations and requirements have increased dramatically. So I'll talk about a few of them. One would be would certainly be on the government side. We deal a lot with the DoD compliance. So you've got your DoD or Department of Defense contractors that now are falling under what's called CMMC. You'd be shocked at how many smaller businesses. The government doesn't really care if you're in the supply chain. They don't care if you're just making a little nut or a bolt. But if you're making a nut or a bolt that's being used, on the space station, then you have to secure your organization. So we've got manufacturing groups with 20 and 30 employees, that are having to do some pretty heavy lift stuff to get compliant, including a formalized assessment. Now, it's not that bad for most of the other industries. Again, we can apply the litmus test of, are you managing or maintaining sensitive material? and if you are, then there's likely a requirement. At the state level, there's privacy laws that have increased. In California, they came out with the California Privacy Act a couple of years ago. That's been revised, and there's a new version of that that took place in, I believe, January of 2023. So now, which will formally take place in June. There are about 6 or 7 other states that are following right behind California to have very similar privacy laws. So again, that means if you're managing or maintaining sensitive material for other people, that the privacy law is basically saying that those people have rights, and they have rights to know that if their data is in your hands, that you're going to secure it appropriately, right? That's the distilled version of what all those different privacy laws say.
No,
So again, one of those 6.
Let me ask you. So, are we talking now things like maybe like a mortgage broker who might have information about the person applying for that mortgage? That information, it becomes that sensitive information, and so compliance applies to them.
It does, and that's where some of the overlapping stuff comes in. So at the privacy law level, it's any consumer information, right? So it could be through mortgage, it could be through healthcare, but that's just one of the changes that we're seeing. But we are seeing it take place in about 6 or 7 states right now. California leading the charge, Colorado, Utah, Virginia. There's several others, but the impact of that is once you get more than 2 or 3 states that are requiring something pretty much at the national level, any national focused organization, it's just going to follow suit, because
that's right.
I can't do something different in California and Colorado than I do everywhere else, right?
Right.
So that's impacting things. The bigger impact that we're seeing in the small business space with I think the widest reach right now would be changes to the GLBA, Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act. There's called the FTC Safeguards Rule. There was guidance given out around that in December of 21 to go into effect January of 22, and then to be formally acknowledged by here in 23. I think it's June of 23. It's been pushed back a little bit, but that affects anyone that's deemed a financial institution. There's a broad definition of financial institution, and this is why it's so impacting everything from CPAs and accountants to mortgage brokers, mortgage payday lenders, payday loans, obviously non-federally insured credit unions, car dealerships. I mean, there are so many things. If you're anywhere in the money lending and money changing hands, lane, whether you're brokering it or you're actually facilitating it, you have now got a requirement to do a basic security assessment every year and risk analysis every year. You have to do monitoring. If you're not willing to do monitoring, you have to do a pen test of your environment every year. There's about 9 different steps that are included there, and then it impacts so many businesses, so many different verticals. That this is one area where, as service providers, if you've got these type of clients and you're not speaking about it, I guarantee you, especially if you have a car dealership, they've had 50 calls about this from 50 other vendors in the past month. And if you're not even talking about it, you're going to lose that client.
Yep. I mean, so, all right. So let's take that one step further, right? So for those that are not in the compliance space, right? And I think you mentioned like law firms, they might have, sensitive information that they need to protect and can't have get out there. Let's help that managing partner at that small law firm. Let's help that. How do we help them make that decision?
Every state, I believe every state, 49 or 50 of them certainly have state level breach notification laws. So at minimum, if that data were to get out for the impacted party, the law firm then has to go to the impacted party and let them know. Based on different states, you may have to publish it, so you need to put it in the newspaper or somewhere publicly. I think the impact to the organization is reputational impact. I always use the example of, Target, Home Depot, Sony Pictures. They were all breached, I was buying hammers at Home Depot the next day, right? I mean, Home Depot being such a big, store, right, and providing such a specific service for me as a homeowner, that I'm going to go there. I was there the next day buying tools and doing whatever, and I wasn't really worried about the fact that they reported that millions and millions of records were impacted, right? Now, if that were my lawyer or my CPA, I might feel different about it, right? Because it's such a relationship built sort of relation. That the relationship is the most important thing, right? So,
Yeah.
if I went to my CPA and my CPA sent me a notice and said, "Hey, Eric, your stuff got out along with my top 40 clients. Sorry." I don't know that that's someone that I want to keep doing business with. At minimum, I'm going to say, well, what happened, Bill? Right? What happened, John?
Well, the
Right?
flip side of that is, I mean, let's take that small firm that isn't doing any sort of monitoring. Then
Right.
what they only know a breach happened when they find out themselves in a bad way, right? I mean,
That's
it's
exactly right.
it's kind of like when they find out that their email's been compromised because somebody calls them up and be like, "Did you mean to send me this crazy email? Because it looks like you've been hacked, right?"
That's
So
right.
I
That's
mean,
right.
that's the only way. And then what happens legally? Do you know from that law firm they can't really disclose the breach and the extent of it because they have no idea because they weren't monitoring anything, right?
Yeah, but that puts you in a
So then,
weird jeopardy position where you then have to go to all of your clients. If you can't pinpoint what exactly was breached, so let's say that your file server that has your PII and other sensitive material was hit. That the server itself or the environment was hit, and you can't pinpoint which data got exposed. It's then your responsibility to go to all potentially impacted folks and say that their stuff potentially could have gotten out.
yep,
So it's a
that's
worse
rough.
position by not being able to pinpoint that. Okay, we had John's computer, Mary's computer got hit on Monday. We were able to we were monitoring Mary's computer's activity, and we know that Mary's computer at no point was engaging our file server. Therefore, it's limited to Mary's computer. Very simple deal. But if I don't know and I can't prove, and I know that Mary's computer normally is engaging that file server, and I can't 100% say that the file server wasn't impacted, I then must go out and say, all 1,000 people that are on this file server, your stuff could be out there. And that's a
Uh,
that's a horrible position to be in. You don't know.
yeah, no, you really don't. So I mean, so now we're talking, on the non. I mean, and that's an interesting point because it's not necessarily the same kind of compliance for a law firm, right? I mean, are these things is that something that's coming down from? You said a lot of it's at the state level. So is this like the
So
state bar
that's
is?
just state data privacy breach notification laws. So state breach notification laws say if you're an impacted party, then you must be notified, right? This is the bare minimum stuff that any. That's why I apply that litmus
And your
test. If you're
litmus test,
managing
yeah.
or maintaining sensitive material for others, it's your responsibility while it's in your hands. Full
That's
stop.
excellent.
That's it.
Right. Love it. And if you can't, like you said, if you can't pinpoint it, you have to disclose that to everybody. And for an
That's right.
attorney, that's not a great, you don't want to be sending out those notifications or CPA, all your
Lucky enough,
information.
the attorneys get it, right? They understand being in a strong, defensible position. So when we lay it out to attorneys, we say, hey, your best bet is just to deploy 24/7 systems monitoring, 20, real, vulnerability testing at a pretty aggressive pace, and then that way, should something happen, your response is yes, this happened. This is what our understanding of the impact is, and we had these systems in place. By the way, our security operations team is the one that caught it within the first 2 hours of breach, right? So that's a much better statement than we don't know, right?
Yeah.
And they get that. That's something I lay that out for a lot of business owners, and the light bulb kind of goes off, and they're like, yeah, for $300 a month or $500 a month, why wouldn't I at least be in this position where I know I've got the responsibility, I'm agreeing I have the responsibility, and at no point can someone say I wasn't doing at least something to thwart the concern.
Yeah, and I think that it's funny because the bar, the American Bar Association, they don't take a specific a stance on it, to say you've got to do X, Y, and Z. They basically say you've got to be doing what's reasonable to protect this data. And I think, and when that argument is, well, what's reasonable, when the state says you've got to be able to disclose this, that means, you can logically say then it's reasonable that you should have this level of security and monitoring because that's reasonable. Otherwise, how are you going to be able to disclose that other than, you were completely oblivious? That's not reasonable. You chose to
Yep.
turn a blind eye. That's not reasonable, right? So when it
Yeah.
is so financially, viable and easy, doable, it's
Yeah,
definitely
that's something we also battle a lot. Whether it's what most of these compliance and regulations are written obviously by lawyers, and there's there may be other interested parties that are in there weighing in and saying, hey, this is too difficult, or if we specify SIM technology, or if we specify some other technology, it'll price groups out. So you'll see the language relaxed a bit to say a reasonable, or for HIPAA, they say that you should do vulnerability scans periodically. I don't know what periodically means, right? So we've often over the years we interpreted that as quarterly, and I think that still meets the standard. If you said periodically, if you said quarterly scanning, I think that that's enough. But again, if you get lax on your quarterly scan and 3 months turns into 4 or 5 months between the scans, then you're automatically in a worse spot. So we've now over the last couple of years been able to offer real time vulnerability scanning. So it's a daily scan at effectively the same price that I used to offer quarterly scanning for. So if you can get more service for effectively the same price, why wouldn't you take the more service? Right.
that's right.
So we're really trying to use sort of best practice guidance and a level of realism when we're having these conversations with our partners. And again, if we're talking about plus or minus $5 here or $10 to get where you need to get to, um, you know if I can help you understand that buying the cheapest thing on the menu isn't necessarily in your best interest, and leveling up for
Seldom is.
10% is gonna give you much more benefit, then you can hopefully then relay that to your end client. And I'm hoping to be able to empower. One of my goals here this year and the next year is to empower our partners with enough education and have conversations like we're having right now, that the world itself sort of levels up, right? The MSP community certainly levels up and starts looking at things a little bit differently. That doesn't mean you have to deploy what I'm offering. There's lots of solutions out there, but you need to start asking these questions.
Well, yeah, I get that. And I think, people appreciate that. Nobody wants to be, told, hey, I'm the only, I'm the only girl in town, date me.
Right.
Right. So, well, let me ask you this. So to that MSP who's looking for a solution, they hear this, they're like, yep, that's great. That makes perfect sense. I do need to be offering. I mean, why am I not offering this to my clients? It's another way for us to provide them the level of security they need without us having to learn new products, learn, hire people who are cybersecurity experts, but we can easily, partner with SOCSoter. So let me ask you this for them. Why SOCSoter and not somebody else?
I think a couple of things. One, the fact that we've got a really comprehensive stack of services, so we're not just focused on the marketing name game of EDR, XDR, NDR, MTR, right? These all these different three letters that effectively mean endpoint detection and response. That's just a layer of what we offer. We also allow you. We're also agnostic on the endpoint, so we allow you to bring your own technology. That's one of the things that we recognized really early about the MSP community is that, you guys have a lot to do. Your IT generalist, typically you're supporting a wide range of clients. And there's certain technologies like your RMM, like your PSA, that you're going to want to standardize on. So standardization, if EDR, and I think we said earlier that EDR is becoming part of that standard beyond just antivirus. So if EDR becomes your standard and you want to standardize on Sophos or SentinelOne or Cylance or any of these other competent EDR antivirus solutions, we allow you to do so. So that's one of our biggest differentiators. We allow you to use your own product. We'll monitor it because we've got the API interconnects. We've built out technology integration partnerships with the top brands that are out there, so you can bring in your own tech. And then the third thing I'd say about us is as far as a why SOCSoter is compelling price points across the board. So not only getting a wide range of service, network, cloud, endpoint, the ability to bring in your own technologies, whether they be cloud services or endpoint services, and to be able to do so for an effective price point. Those are the three things.
I'd agree. And I got to say, being a partner already, totally agree with all three of those. And I'd say that the support is also fantastic. You call up, you get somebody on the phone right away. They get on your issue, whatever it might be. They walk you through it, or they're calling you and saying, "Hey, we've got this." Had that many times. This is, we noticed this is down. Is there a problem? Oh, let us check. Oh, crap, that was down. Great, thanks. That's good. Good looking out. Hey, it looks like this network is actively being attacked. Want to give you the heads up, and that was really cool to be able to, because these were like government contractors, and they love knowing that. And it's funny that just the number of attacks that they get, they're very small. They're one of those that you said, they've got 20 some people. Yep, this is a government contractor with 20 some employees. They've got that same CMMC requirement. But it's really cool to get that call and say, hey, look, they're actively being attacked. They're getting all these hits from these this country right now. And if nothing else, going back to the client and saying, hey, look, this is what's going on. The SOC team is actively monitoring it for any sort of intrusion to see if anything happens. But this is what's going on. Made them feel great because normally it's they know that they're under attack frequently, but they didn't really know until they could be pointed out. When we first came on and we looked at the logs and we're like, holy crap. I mean, it was almost nonstop, the number of pings they were getting from China and from Russia. Kid you not, both heavily. And it's like, seriously? And then, some days nothing, but other days just boatloads. And so it was really cool having you guys come in, monitor it, and then be able to go to the client. And they were like, oh, this is great. And then we can generate the reports we need for, when they want it. Really great.
Yeah, you bring up the fourth sort of reason why I think is all the next step guidance, right? So you mentioned support. As a SOC, I would expect anyone in my space would have a SOC that can relay the alerts to you. That's sort of the job, right? But I think that where we go beyond that is capacity to not only react to the immediate concern and provide your remediation guidance and stuff like that. But then it's kind of that who you're going to call, right? So now we know they've been impacted. We know there's a challenge. We now have a next responsibility, which is incident response, right? We need to look at not only the one machine. Is it the one machine or is it 20 machines? Is it isolated to the single machine and the data that's on it, or did it get to the file server, right? We need to know these things, and depending on your industry, there may be a requirement up to like a 72-hour, we see a lot, like in the insurance space, 72-hour requirements for incident response reporting, right? So you figure 72 hours. That's from point of notice, right? So you get a call Wednesday night that says Johnny's computer's acting weird. The clock starts. From that point, you've got a 72-hour window to be able to produce a report that says this is what we saw, this is what we're seeing, this is our analysis, right? Who are you going to call if you don't have this layer in place?
Right.
And again, if it's not us, find the next company. But if you don't have this layer in place and they don't have the capacity to launch a forensics case, which we do right away. So if you called us, even if we weren't on a network, so for those out there that if you're already compromised, even if we're not on the network, we can very quickly launch an incident response. We'll overnight devices to scan network traffic. We'll set up the cloud infrastructure. We'll set up endpoint agents so that we can scan individual endpoints right away. This is within a couple of hours now. You've got a team that's scouring the data, looking for these points of concern, amassing information and evidence. And that way, by that next day or the day after that, you've got a stack of reporting that at least shows that while you, the MSP, we're doing your job. Yes, the client was impacted. Whose fault it is, likely it's the user's fault for clicking on something, but it doesn't really matter. You had your hands around it. You understood the assignment, right? You understood what was required, and you put the appropriate resources towards it. By the way, we did this very quickly. That's where
Love it.
you want to be as an MSP.
Absolutely. Now, now, I was thinking, for those MSPs out there that are not currently, like a SOCSoter partner or somebody like that, um, yeah, I just don't understand why they wouldn't be. I mean, it's such an important piece to have, right? And it's such a great piece for us. And I think for us now, realizing that there are so many of our clients, because of, I think your litmus test it's a great way to say, hey, look, how many of our clients have sensitive information that needs to be, protected. And yeah, we do a great job protecting it, with our, like we like Threat Locker. Threat Locker is a great product that we lock down all of our clients with it. But in terms of monitoring and in terms of reporting, incident response, that is sorely lacking for most of our clients, because we don't drop that SOCSoter piece in with it. Now, I think, going back to it, just like I think all other MSPs should be, is going back to their clients and saying, hey, look, this is important, and this is why it's important, right? I mean, if you get compromised, right, and hopefully you don't, but there's a reporting component of this, and I don't want you to have to go to all of your clients and say, hey, look, this information got out because, let's say, they had an employee who was careless with their laptop, or they logged into their 365 account, and SharePoint from a personal computer that was compromised, and we weren't managing it, but now the bad guys have got access to all of the company information. They start, they do whatever they're going to do with it, and now you've got to report to all of your clients that their information is out there. That's not a good look.
No, it's not a good look. And then you come back to like the idea of reasonable security. What is what they had deployed? Was it reasonable? Was it adequate given the risk or concerns of the organization? And that's, it won't be up to you to make that determination. To be the client's going to make that determination pretty quickly when it happens, right? So uh, this all comes down to a lot of the time, just again, this education piece and helping people understand, where we are today, how things are moving, what's different today than it was 5 years ago. I've got a lot of clients today that partners today when we talk to them, and I mentioned compliance, and they go, "Oh yeah, I don't have any medical clients." I didn't say medical. I didn't say HIPAA. I just said compliance and regulations. And the immediate thought, and I cringe because it happens so much, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we don't deal with medical. We don't have any clients like that." And then we'll be like 20 minutes into a conversation, and all of a sudden the light bulb goes off, and they tell me about the CPA, the CPA, the hedge fund, and the law firm, and I'm like,
Yeah.
where was the CPA certainly where was the CPA in the financial services group before? Like obviously they've got some sensitive data, right?
Yeah.
Like, but again, they're not applying that test. They're not really thinking about it critically about what their clients are actually doing. If you do that, you don't need to know anything about any of the other compliance requirements. All you have to do is just really just know about your own client. If you do that, you're going to be way ahead.
Yeah, and I think for us, we're always looking to fit the right technology, with our clients. So whatever their issue is, right? And it doesn't matter what they're looking for, whether it's a new, practice management application, whether it's like, hey, how do we, whatever it is, right? Whatever their business case is, what's the right technology for this, right? Whether it's they're currently on old, copper line phones, and they and their phone system's expensive, to replace. What's the right solution for that? And I think that what MSPs are, like us, need to start realizing is that and to your point of education, is that the finding that right fit for your client, in most cases, it's not about selling them this Ferrari when they really just needed a Ford Escort to get to and from, point A to point B. And
that's right.
That's what I like
Nothing
about
wrong with
SOCSoter.
Nothing wrong with
That's
the Camry.
right.
It's a great
There you
car.
go. There you go. I think SOCSoter is a great Camry, right? It's like it is, but it kind of is, right? It's reliable. It's there. It's dependable. It's a great,
That's right.
and it's so affordable. So, and I think that's the great part about this and to your point, it's about educating the service provider so that when the client, we can apply that to our clients and be like, hey, look, we saw there was a big gap in our cybersecurity, and when we brought Threat Locker on to be able to kind of lock down endpoints, and I really like that. I sleep much better at night, and our problems have gone down. But the part that we're only applying to some of our clients and not all of, and that's about to change now. Thanks to this conversation is that we really need to give them that kind of the access to a SOC who's monitoring everything so that they are fully compliant, and protecting that information, completely. So it's not a matter of, hey, look, I just want to upsell a client and make a few more bucks. That's not it at all. In fact, for those clients who don't, they don't need it. And
That's
you
right.
shouldn't even talk to them about it because
I
they don't
say it all
need
the
it.
time. Your barber shop, your plumber, your pizza place, maybe not. Maybe not. Okay.
Yep.
Throw out some EDR, because I do think most MSPs now need to standardize on an EDR platform of choice.
Mm-hmm.
But throw that out. That'll give you a level of monitoring. You throw them into your RMM, and you'll be good. But for the ones that are on the other side of that litmus test, there's more to be done.
Couldn't agree more. And honestly, I think that's a great point, a great place to kind of stop. And I look forward to more people kind of getting up to speed on this because I think so many you know, I like to look at everything from the small business owner's perspective, and they've heard so many horror stories about ransomware and then what's happened with insurance that so many of them were paying for it. Now they can't even afford to, and a lot of places aren't even offering ransomware insurance anymore. And so I think it's a very confusing time for small business owners when it comes to cyber. I think that whole field is very nebulous and confusing, and they need somebody who can come in and say, hey, look, we've got a great, easy, affordable solution for you. You'll be able to sleep well at night, and it's here you go. And it does all the things you need. The state, the federal government, you're not going to get in trouble because you're not complying with this. And at the same time, it's not about, like HIPAA, and nobody likes that stuff. That HIPAA compliance. So many people, they're tired of hearing it, comply, because all it sounds like is buy, buy, buy. I'm trying to sell
Right.
you something, and
Right.
I've gotten somebody, with some teeth to help enforce this. You know what? Go pound sand. I don't want to buy something just because you say I need it. I'm fine. So I think finding that balance of this is what I need. This protects my company. This protects my clients, my customers. This is great. And it's affordable. Great. And maybe that's my own head trash about the compliance and bye
No,
bye.
you're not wrong.
But
You're not wrong.
but I think nobody likes to be sold anything. They want solutions to their problems. And I think that's where SOCSoter really comes in. It solves a problem for the MSP. It solves a problem for our clients. And so we're just happy to be partners with SOCSoter, and hopefully others, follow suit. They get, and if you say, like you say, if not with SOCSoter, with somebody, but there needs to be more of this out in the community because whether people like it or not, because you're a US business, we are the targets in the world. We're the country with the money, and people are coming after our money. And, maybe it's because I'm an old army guy, but, for me, it all comes down to protecting our own and
Your
keeping us
money,
safe.
your identity, your money, your identity, right? Because
Yep.
again, you look at the mortgage world. What does it take to get a mortgage today? Every bit of information about me and my spouse
Right.
and my family and my financials, right?
Right.
And all that data gets packaged up. And I say this is Matt Connor, and Matt Connor. If I've got all the data about Matt Connor, is worth $50.
Oh man, I got to work on
Yeah,
that.
but you can buy them on the open market.
You can buy them. That's exactly right. No, it's true, and that's how it works.
Buy a packet of your identity for $50, and I can do what I want, and that's where you see the next level of attack coming out, right? Because now once I have this portfolio of Matt, well, now I can start attacking all Matt's stuff.
Yep,
and then I get the money.
That's right. It's so true. All right, well, Eric, it's been a pleasure having you on today. So for those that are looking, and you guys only partner with MSPs, right? So if a company came to you that it really wouldn't be of much use for our, our listeners and people who are watching who are small business owners, but for MSPs.
No. They can. They come to us. What I'll do is I'll typically align them with a partner. So I'll find,
there you go,
depending on where they are in the industry, your area or otherwise, and then we find them a home. So because a lot of the times they'll come in, we get a lot of requests through peer to peer, right? Especially with CMMC. So we'll provide the guidance. We'll start working with them. We'll talk to them about what's required, and then from there we'll say, okay, let's get you with a partner, because we need that partnership. We need you guys, because you guys have the boots on the ground, the networking understanding and networking relationship that we're not looking to have. Yeah. So if we can do our part and you do your part, we can all win.
Well, there you go. So then I guess for those MSPs or small businesses looking for looking to integrate a SOC and have that security team in place, they can find out more at SOCSoter.com, right? That's
correct?
Yep. And that's SOCSoter.com.
Correct. That's correct. Right. And my email address is epinto@SOCSoter. So EPINTO @SOCSoter. You can email me and I'll certainly point you in the right direction, and happy to help.
Fantastic. And we'll put links to both of those in the description below, or wherever it ends up being.
You can leave my email out of the description. That stuff gets data mined.
There you go. Perfect. Eric, it was great having you on. And thanks for coming on the show.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Appreciate it. Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Cyber Business Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.